So another question we get asked often is, how do we actually find the value of the commercial real estate? And that's an interesting way. And there really are three methodologies in which you can sit down and look at how to find value in there. And one thing to keep in mind is that your real estate agent is not finding value. They're finding the market price or what the property should sell for. An appraiser, however, finds value. And it's a kind of a semantic type argument until you really dive into what the difference of it is. But generally, they're going to look, both your agent and your appraiser are going to look at these the same way. Probably the most common that you're going to see out there is going to be based off of the income capitalization, or what we often call is a cap rate. Now, what a cap rate is doing is it's looking at the ratio between the net operating income, or your total income you're making from property operations, and dividing it by the purchase price of the property. Now, what this does is it kind of gives you a bit of a risk multiple, and if you have comparable properties, they're risk the same, and that cap rate really is a risk component, and you would be able to do it that way. So if I have two properties that are risk the same, this one is at a 7 cap, I don't know the cap rate on this one, I can assume that because they're risked relatively the same, I can have a cap rate of 7 and then use the net operating income, which is going to be different between both properties, and come up with the actual dollar value or dollar amount that that property would be worth, and how I would turn around and work through that portion of it. Now, the other one is going to be more like what we see in residential with the comparable market analysis, or a CMA. Now, in residential, we turn around and take a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house and compare it to other 2-bedroom, 1-house baths and make adjustments. In commercial, we don't necessarily look at how many bathrooms and bedrooms and that kind of stuff has, because it doesn't have bathroom or bedrooms, right? What we are looking at is, hey, this is a 5,000 square foot retail space on a similar section of road or similar traffic count with the same demographics or similar demographics that could buy some of the same things. And that's going to change the way we're going to look at things a little bit as well. And that's what we're going to look at and make adjustments based off what those comparable market analyses are going to do. And the third and the final way, and maybe not as common, is we do basically the reconstruction or the construction cost of the property. So oftentimes when we see this, is what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, if I were to build this same building, it's going to cost me $150, $200 a square foot, whatever the case happens to be, and that's what I'm going to value the building as. Now, oftentimes we either use this in one of two situations. One, that building is dilapidated, it needs some work, and there's really no way of finding a whole lot of value in there. Or two, it is a very, very, very unique building. So I had one years ago where it was a building that was built to actually blow engines up inside of it and test how they would react when they blew up. About a dozen or so of those in the world, and most of those are on military bases or used for military purposes. So therefore, they're not really going to be out there in the market. We're not going to see a lot of what those comps really come in at, because they're just not there, and they're not there that often. So in that case, we went to a general contractor and said, hey, if we were to rebuild this building, where would you put it at? And they're like, oh yeah, $980 something a square foot. So therefore, I was able to go back and say, hey, the value of this building is probably about $980 a square foot. And we determined the value that way. We determined what the market rate would be that way, depending on if you're the broker or the appraiser. So yeah, we have a few ways to find value. It can be a little confusing. It can be a little bit weird. Ultimately, the key thing to keep in mind is that the value for your real estate is what a active and willing buyer is willing to pay for it. Yeah, we've got all these calculations, but even if it's the calculations, we saw it as interest rates were increasing very quickly. That may be what the value said supported on comps, but with what was going on, because there was no new comps, it's really what the buyer is willing to pay and what the seller is willing to meet at. That's really what the market value is going to come down to, but that's nowhere near as scientific, and we wouldn't make any really informed decisions based off just kind of whims of what we think buyers and sellers are going to do. So yeah, that's how we find value in commercial real estate.